Hello, everybody, and welcome to Adobe Live. We'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which we are creating and streaming from today and pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. My name is Flynn, and I'm here with my good friend Alex Lehours, artist, illustrator, and designer. How are you, Alex?
I'm great. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm really good, thank you. It's great to have you back on. We were just chatting backstage. It feels like yesterday we were on, but it was like 2020 we had you on, which is crazy. It's been way too long.
Yeah, it's been a while. So yeah, good to be back.
And also the first time you were ever on, we were also just chatting. You were on with our good friend Jeremy Lord, and in studio, in person, and I was at the hospital with this like 6-hour-old baby. So yeah.
Now it's all changed, huh?
Times have changed. What's up, chat? We're in for a great stream today. Jump into Behance. And that's the chat that we like to use. If you're on YouTube, we won't ignore you, but we might not see it quite as quick. So jump into Behance if you want to ask questions as we're going along. If you have questions for Alex, myself, illustrating, drawing, being an artist, getting paid, getting paint out of your clothes, whatever it is related to what we're chatting about today. But before we get into it, Alex, how about a little bit of a background of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I'm basically I'd consider myself an artist now, but to get technical, I'm a artist, illustrator, and designer. My background from back in the day was graphic design, so that's why a lot of my work still has sort of that design sort of element to it. I basically have worked for myself as a freelance artist for just over 10 years now. So
Wow.
do a range of work. Most of it is the mural side of things, but I do a lot of digital work as well, digital illustration, a little bit of branding and that sort of thing. Not so much anymore. It's mostly tailored towards more of the art side, if you like. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And I like to use both, even when I'm painting, which we'll go through today. The computer, the Wacom, all the Adobe programs are still a big part of my painting process as well, putting the concepts together. So it's nice to sort of have those three different worlds of the design, illustration, and painting sort of coming together as one. So yeah, that's pretty much that's my story.
That's awesome. I always love how like I'll just see through your Instagram like what you're up to, and it's like, yeah, I'm on site for like 2 months or something like that. So it's nice to get away from. Must be nice to get away from the computer and out of the office and doing things by hand and stuff as well. Like balance
Yeah,
it all out.
exactly. It's nice to have a bit of a balance. I'm very much the personality. I get bored. I'm never happy where I am. So I'll be
Right.
happy for a while. Week or two later, I want something different. So it is quite nice to be on site and then come home and be back at my desk and then vice versa. So yeah, can't complain. It is a very nice balance.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I think we have your website up here as well. So let's jump over and check that out. Maybe we could pick a project to kind of have a look at before we get
Yeah,
into what we're going to do today.
absolutely. So this just my website, my webpage, alexlehours.com. Bit of self-promotion there. And basically, I've just got a few of my favorite projects listed. Like I said, it's a mix of painting, illustration, all that sort of stuff. So I guess it makes sense. The project that we're going to talk about today and go through is this huge wall that I've just finished, this one here. So I might just click into that.
Great.
A bit of a background for this one. This was in Sydney for the Inner West Council, and basically it's about 60 meters long from
Wow.
memory.
It's massive.
Yeah, it's a big one. That's why I was there for a few months battling the elements. Of course, it was late last year that I started, and that's when Sydney had its torrential rain for months on end. So
Yeah.
that didn't help. And then if it wasn't raining heavily, it was scorching hot. And basically, the sun would sit here every day
Right.
for a good few hours. So yeah, just roasting and all that sort of thing. But
Was
anyway,
did it end up, depending on the direction, would it end up like being in your eyes or was it like on your
not
back?
so much in my eyes. It would be so basically in the morning it would sit behind the building. It was perfect. From mid-morning onwards for the rest of the day, it would sit behind me. And it was pretty ruthless. Like it was towels around the neck, that sort of thing. Lots and lots of water. Or there were a few days where I definitely had it definitely hit me. Needed to sort of run around the corner and hide for a while. But
Yeah. I'll
no, it
bet.
was well worth it. So I think the whole thing measures about 300 square meters.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was definitely a big one. It did end up taking close to 4 months to finish, which is a huge, like I do spend a lot of time on these walls, but nothing close to that. It's definitely the biggest that I've done by far. So
And
in
there's
terms
already
of
a question in chat on that. So is this the biggest
in,
mural you've ever done? Must be. It's
in terms
huge.
of square meterage, yes. It's definitely it's funny. It's not the longest and it's not the tallest, but it is
Oh,
the largest in terms of space, if you like. So
right.
because the highest point over here on the far left was about 8 meters high, and the rest of it was about 4 to 5 meters high all the way along, which might sound big, but from an artist's point of view, when you're used to being up and down in scissor lifts, it's quite a nice, manageable height. So
Mm.
not too crazy, but yeah, definitely the largest in terms of square meterage. So yeah, it was a big challenge, but yeah, got there in the end, and yeah, happy to see the final result. So
Nice.
yeah.
Well, there we go. And did you, one more question, we'll move on, but do you paint it all yourself? Do you get people to help you out painting? Surely.
Most of it, I was by myself. I did have a
Wow.
few friends and artists come and help me here and there, which was a huge help because the longer it went on, the more I realized, yeah, I need more help. But it'd be great to get a whole team of people on board, but sometimes that's just not possible. So
Yeah.
majority of it I did do myself, but yeah, I definitely had some help along the way, which was good. Good to keep the mind sane as well, because when you're out there doing that by yourself, it can get very overwhelming and you can feel very, very small for a long time. So it is nice to have other people around to just chat to and make yourself feel better about things. So
Yeah, I saw like an Instagram as well when I was looking at the project in a little bit more detail, like someone saying I used to drive past this like every day on the way to work, and I would see it like slowly progress, and it didn't know
yeah.
you or something, but like is this guy out there like every day painting
Yeah.
this wall?
Yeah, I definitely called that home for a little while. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was fun. So yeah, and I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of content in there, a lot of like even hidden details and
Mm.
meanings and all that sort of stuff, which I'll get into as well. So even the guys who are helping me, people walk past, they kept saying, "Wow, you've put a lot of detail into this," and
Mm.
me being me, I couldn't help myself. I definitely halfway through started to regret it a little bit, but like I say, when you've got the finished product up there, you want to be happy with it, and I'm glad we went to the effort we went to. So
Mm.
yeah, it's yeah, all good now. So yeah.
That's great. All right. Well, so how do you start with something like this, I guess?
Good question. So basically, as you can see, there's a huge main road in between the wall and where I took a photo. So what I do, first things first, you go have a site visit, all the rest of it. I just take a photo of things. So I'm not too technical. I'm just going to open up a page. So I guess from scratch, I do everything in Illustrator. Basically, I use a little bit of Photoshop just to sort of crop out images that I want to use, and maybe posterize things or change a threshold or things like that. But mostly it's all done in Illustrator. So I'll just open up a A3 size page. That should be enough. And then basically, yeah, once I've taken my photo of the wall, which was this is what it used to look like.
So it's a slight improvement.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks. I basically just put it into Illustrator, and using the pen tool, I just draw my template pretty much. So I'll just show you very, very quickly. I do have one ready to go, but I'll just do it very quickly. Yeah, so again, nothing's too technical on my end because it's one of those things, a wall this size is so big that I sort of, even though I have a plan, I kind of make it up anyway when I'm out on site. This is good just to have, to be able to show clients, to, give them an idea of what they're going to have on the wall, how it's going to, roughly look, and then things may alter. But I basically just use pen, shape tools, and pretty much just draw my template from there. When there's things like, as you can see over here, there's, it goes down on an angle. It doesn't have to be accurate. I basically just roughly draw it like this and sort of just make it up as I go, just to give me a little bit of a guide basically. And then and that's it. So then that's basically my rough shape. What I'll do, I won't bother drawing all the other stuff. I do have one ready to go, so I'll just open that up. This was basically my template. So I put in things like all the windows, all that sort of stuff, any sort of, obstacles that there might be, electricity boxes, electrical cords, all that sort of stuff. I also have an idea of the colors I want to use. So I like to include that as well, just to say, this might change, but at the beginning, just to give me a guide as well, to see what I'm working with. Because with my work, I like to keep it quite minimal in terms of colors. And that's basically the template. I start with that, and then the next part, I basically just brainstorm a bunch of images. So backstory to this before we go any further, I'll get the images back up so it makes adds a bit more context. So on the right hand side here, these are two businesses that have occupied this building. So this is a shared building with this long facade split in the middle. On the far right side is a mechanic who's been there for 30 plus years, but he specializes in vintage cars and trucks and has a huge car and truck collection himself, and tractors. And then on the left side, which lucky enough is pretty much split straight down the middle, was they're not there anymore, but they still own the building. They were a Greek phyllo pastry company, and these guys here, the portraits, were the grandparents who came over from Cyprus, 60 odd years ago.
Right, cool.
So what I wanted to focus on was not so much, obviously what the businesses are about, but more about the people behind the business. There's a lot of family history. There's a lot of really cool content there. So it was more of a historical piece. That's basically, they were the two stories behind it. The challenge was to try and, keep the whole thing looking quite uniform, even though they're completely different industries. I want the whole thing to have sort of a uniform effect. So that's basically where I started. And I'll get into a little bit later how I, tried to keep it consistent throughout. But that's pretty much it. So from there, what I do is I basically just, for each business, they provided a bunch of content. I also researched. So I just basically, found images, all sorts of stuff. I wanted that sort of nostalgic, really retro vintage sort of feel behind it to match all the cars. I just collect any sort of images online just for reference, and go from there. And then in my head, I kind of have an idea of where I want things sitting. What I do as well is I like to work on angles. I just like it. So what I do, these red lines here, I like everything. And again, I'll go back to, I don't know if you can see, but everything's sort of on that diagonal.
Yeah, it's on like a bit of an angle, yeah.
Yeah, rather than, I just prefer that.
So before we jump into the angle side of things, just had a question from chat, if you don't mind. How is the transition from graphic design to what you do now, and what part was the most challenging?
I guess for me, I was lucky. I've always liked painting and drawing anyway, so I was doing a lot of that stuff on the side, and I've been doing that since school or even earlier. So I guess for me, graphic design, and no disrespect to the industry at all, I enjoy it, but it wasn't really what I wanted to end up doing. So it was almost just that was my foot in the door out of uni, out of studying, all that sort of stuff. So I guess for me, I was lucky. I was going to a lot of art events, exhibitions, different things, and I started meeting people, building up a bit of a few friends, a bit of a network, and then from there, a few opportunities came in terms of painting and that sort of thing. And at the time I was working full-time as a graphic designer, and I was doing a few little painting jobs on the side, murals, canvases, that sort of thing, and that slowly was starting to take over. So I was very lucky. I didn't really have to sit down and think, okay, I need to stop what I'm doing and go and try and tackle something new. It basically was a natural transition.
Right.
I guess there's no real set sort of answer. Everyone's different, but for me, I was just lucky that my passion basically was overtaking my work. And to be honest, like I was saying, my graphic design stuff still sort of has a big influence on my painting. I still, even talking about these diagonal lines, I still like things with structure. Even though it looks sort of chaotic and mashed together, there's definitely, when I'm working, there's definitely a a set structure and a purpose to where I put certain things and place different elements and text and all that sort of stuff. So that is definitely my graphic design background,
Yeah,
coming through. So yeah, so it's nice to still be able to do that. But yeah, so that was my transition. It was pretty easy for me. It was almost decided for me.
That's a good way to do it. Yeah, I could. Yeah, definitely see it in like the graphic design stuff coming out, like so much of the artwork from even from the collage and the different styles kind of collage together. And then I like that it's a grid. It's not a Swiss grid, it's an angle grid, but it's a grid nonetheless.
Yeah, it is. So, and then so basically I spend a day, even a couple of days, just collecting images. Even on this template, I might create a new layer and just start mucking around with, the shapes. Like, okay, I want something to sort of go there, fill that space. I want something then tucking in maybe behind that, that sort of thing. So, it gives me sort of a rough idea of what I'm thinking. And I love combining imagery and text. So, one of the things I like, if this is a large image, I think from memory, there's a big car there. I love having that sort of set on top of some text for that nice contrast. So already in my head, because this is the same process I do for all my paintings and murals. I already know that that's sort of the pattern that I'm going to be working with. So for this particular one, I basically started with the automotive side. There's some images here that the client sent me that vehicles he owns. There's ones that I found online that I thought maybe had better lighting, better angle. The one I think it's called a Ford Pilot from memory. I think it was this one. Here we go. So I just found this on on your Alamy, stock photo site. It's the same model that this guy owns, but I really like that sort of angle.
Yeah.
I took it into Photoshop and just, desaturated the color, because I'm sure maybe you would have noticed that a lot of my work is a mix of color mixed in with that grayscale. Tonal sort of look, which again adds contrast. And then from there, I take it into Illustrator. Now, sometimes depending on how lazy I'm feeling, I might just crudely use the eraser tool and just, sort of roughly crop this out, that sort of thing, which I'm pretty sure that's what I did for this. Other than that, and then obviously just delete the background. If not, I take that image into Illustrator and just clip it. I use a clipping mask and just draw around the edge. And we'll go from there. So what I'll do, I pretty much have a file that I set up with all the sorts of images. So here we go. There's that card.
Right.
I think I just clipped it very, very crudely in Illustrator. I basically have a file like this with all my sketches, images, whatever I'm thinking, ready to go. And then I just copy it back over here. And to be honest, it's just a matter of just sort of playing around with, with where I think things will go. So I always start with, this wall was a bit tricky because it's so long. If I was doing more of a, say, your standard rectangular shape or square shape, I usually start with something in the middle and then everything else sort of comes
right
around it. But this one, I thought I'll start from the far right, go from the very corner. And I knew I wanted something in this sort of bracket of my lines, if that makes sense. And then, I basically just start piecing it together like that. I start with one thing and then I go back to just brainstorming, like, how am I going to, what other images do I want in there? And a lot of the time when I find images, whether they're in books, online, whatever, that almost provides the idea. So I think, that could work here, that could work there. I created this, I'll drag it over. And like I said, I knew I wanted text sitting behind. So I basically, and I love all the old sort of, you see heaps of them online, Pinterest, even Behance, wherever you are, all these old sort of retro typography based sort of posters and graphics. So I love all that sort of thing. So I basically just picked a font or a couple of different fonts that I like, and I just type in things that I think relate to the business. It doesn't matter what it says, because I know in my head, I'm going to tuck it in this section here behind this car. Again, I like everything on angles. It doesn't have to be too accurate. I sort of just roughly do it like that, shrink it to sort of fit. And then I basically just copy it underneath. Now, what I usually do, this template here, I will copy and paste and basically just clip everything. Oops, sorry. Clip everything into it so it's nice and flush. What's going on? Have I got something wrong layer, I think? No, it's all there. That's what I've done. Sorry.
It's always the live stream thing. You do something like 1,000 times, and then as soon as you're live, you're like, wait, what's happening?
And I'm very much, as silly as it sounds, I don't like to use all the keyboard shortcuts. I don't know why. I love going to the menu and selecting things, so that takes me longer. I don't know why I like doing it. I just feel more comfortable doing things like that. So
whatever works.
Yeah. So already, I've started very, very small, but started piecing little things together. Then I might start playing around with color. One of the things when I'm working is I don't like things that just end, basically. It always has to have, for my work anyway, I want something. So I'm looking at this now here. I feel like, it needs something there, basically, maybe tucked in behind the car on top of the text. So you've got that layered feel. And again, going back to these diagonal lines, one of the things I decided to do, which I thought could work for this project and a good way to sort of create that uniform feel, I decided to create a bunch of old sort of posters that relate back to the businesses. So obviously I can get into this in more detail a bit later, but I thought a way to because with all this sort of nostalgia and history and stuff, a lot of it is, the things that I like are based on how things were portrayed in that sort of time. I think that's a big way of showing, the history behind something. So yeah, I created, so up here you've got the 3 sort of pastry posters, and then down here you've got some automotive ones. So even though they're completely different, they do have that sort of uniform look.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I'll pick one. I think from memory it was the spark plugs one, and it could be anything related to the industry. Like here I've got a pastry rolling machine, got spark plugs here. It doesn't always have to be the obvious sort of thing, like I've got the cars and trucks and tractors, but I like using all sorts of stuff. So this is obviously colored. I'll get into, and again, nothing accurate. I just shrink it, put it into place, sort of put it roughly on the same angle, and then copy it back into this clipping mask, and then sort of move it around. And then from here I will start mucking around with I like to just outline everything as well.
So just a technical question in Illustrator. So because you had already created a clipping mask, you could select that and then just paste a new asset in, and it automatically goes into the clipping mask?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah,
cool.
That way it just keeps it contained within those, that border.
Yeah.
And then once you've got one thing in there, it's nice and easy. And I like to work with layers for certain things, but a lot of the time I'll work on the one layer, and I'm a double clicker. So I just double click into the clipping mask, into the group, whatever.
Center back, center front.
That's
it.
Yeah,
me too. Me too.
Yeah, and then it's just a matter of I just muck around with different sort of background colors. Like I said earlier, I already had an idea of the sorts of colors I wanted to use, which I thought could sort of match both businesses.
Cool. So we got to talk about color then for a second. So color, where do you get it from? And then my follow-up question is, how does that translate to paint on a wall? Okay, good question.
Basically, I start with just the standard swatches in Illustrator.
Mm-hmm.
From there, if I want a different shade, I just use spot colors. Basically, I just click in. Every now and then, if I'm doing different shades of a certain color, I will use PMS colors because they're much easier to select rather than, if I've got 3 different shades of blue, Illustrator and spot colors, Illustrator doesn't recognize, the individual colors, they just see the one. So for example, if I filled this whole area in colors that I don't like, I just use my magic wand tool, and then I can select all the red and change all the red. So if I've got a few shades of different colors that look similar, I definitely use PMS, because then I can select each individual color with no issues. But for this limited sort of palette, either spot colors or the original swatches here are fine. And then what I do, I literally just print out this, and I go to the paint shop and I match it to swatches at the paint shop. Because
right.
Again, it doesn't have to be. These are colors that I've selected that the client were happy with, so it doesn't have to be too accurate. A lot of the paint suppliers these days can actually match Pantone colors, which is pretty clever. So if you go with, I think this actually might even be a Pantone because I've used it in the past. Yeah, so 485, your sort of standard red. I took
that was for the tractor for sure.
Yeah, that was for the tractor. All this red through here, I took that I knew I was going to need a lot of it, so I took it to the paint shop and they were able to match it. You can never tell on screen, to,
Yep.
on a wall with all the different sunlight and all that sort of stuff, you're never going to know. So as long as it's somewhat close, that's basically how I do it. So
yeah, cool.
Yeah, and that's basically the same sort of thing. So I get to a point where I'm looking at this. Yeah, I'm happy so far with how it's all looking. It's a bit sort of messy down here. I basically just like things to look tidy, so I might just fill that in, with black under the car just to make it look a bit tidier. I love things where you've got different colors where maybe they shouldn't be, like maybe that should be navy under there, but I like mixing it up. That basically every element or every shape I put in basically creates a new canvas in that area, if that makes sense. That's what I like about
yeah, it kind of makes the negative space there a bit more of a feature.
Yes. Yeah. And to be honest, when you're walking past it, no one's ever going to notice that anyway. I notice it because I'm the one that's put it together. But yeah, little things like that, you walk past it 10 times out of 10, pretty much. So, and then with this one, I basically just went from right to left, and I thought, okay, what could go next? I've already got a big image. I've got a lot of text. I've got some smaller, illustrative-looking images. And then with this particular one, I knew I wanted more of a scene sitting in behind, rather than another image cropped out to itself. So, and this actually was the client's feedback. He wanted like an old garage from the 50s or whatever,
right?
With his branding on it. So I found this image online. I think it was an old NRMA workstation somewhere. Where was it? I can't remember. It was it was a Caltex garage. So I found this online.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Which I thought was
it's like
cool.
super 50s.
Yeah, very cool. And I thought that's exactly the era of the vehicles that he works with. I love that look with the old, the flags hanging, the old gas pumps, if you want to call them that. So then all I did, and so in my head, this grey car was going to be painted in my grey tones, shaded, try to make it look as realistic as possible, contrasted with more of the vector looking stuff sitting behind. So I had that already. So I knew the next image, I didn't want it to be 100% realistic, but I wanted it to still have that sort of look from a distance, but in more of a vintage way. So I thought maybe the whole posterized look, like a lot of the old posters used to use, could work. So I basically just took this image into Photoshop. I'll open up the one I've used. I mean, I can do it very quickly if people are interested.
Yeah, why not? Sure, we'll show it. We got time.
Very, very simple. I'm sorry, I've opened up the wrong one again. Oh, JPEG. Camera. Sorry, it's a big image. Here we go. So that's the original image. It's already in grey, sort of grey tones anyway. There's a few little, looks like a bluey sort of tinge to it. I got to image, adjustments, and posterize. And basically it's just creating all the shades in there is now almost like an image trace in Illustrator, where it sort of just condenses it to limited colors. For this particular one, this was okay. And then I used this as my base. I can't remember how many layers I did. I think I only did, I did 4. that was pretty much it. So then this was the one ready to go. I cranked the level a little bit and the colors just to sort of make it stand out a bit, because I know with this sort of stuff it doesn't have to be too accurate, because I'm going to be hand painting it anyway. It's just a guide. And so, you know, I use three shades of gray when I'm painting, and black and white, and then I mix different shades of those colors together. So that's why I sort of tried to keep it limited. And then obviously it's still got all the Caltex branding. That's when I take it into Illustrator. I just use the Photoshop file. And I think I've already got it open. Yeah, I keep saying basically, I say that really well. I created these vector graphics based on sort of the old garage, hotel, motel sort of signage that you used to see.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, and again, very crudely sort of, use the free transform tool just to sort of angle it, you know, but it looks it's on the right angle. Again, because I'm going to hand paint it, it'll sort of automatically have that look anyway. And then the way I cropped it, I didn't have any of this NRMA branding anyway, the way it was in. So then once I'm happy with that, grouped it all together, I take it back over, and I know I want it to sort of fill this space here. So I basically copy it into the clipping mask. I want it sitting behind that spark plugs poster, just to fill that sort of space. And then I just muck around with, the sizing. From memory, actually, I did have another poster, so I might just duplicate that one just for argument's sake, just to fill that. Yeah, because I wanted it to sort of have that border or that boundary.
Yeah.
And I think that's very close to how I had it sitting. And then from there, I'm basically just filling this space and then mucking around with what I think could work. I mean, I could go back. Obviously, I've done this before for this particular project, so it's coming together pretty fast, pretty quickly. Whereas there'll be times something new, I could change this car here, 3 or 4 times, different car, different angle. Do I change the perspective of it, all that sort of stuff? Do I move it away? Whatever. So it's basically, it's very much a trial and error sort of thing. That's the beauty of these programs like Illustrator. Before I started using Illustrator, I used to hand sketch mural concepts, and
that would have taken a while.
Pain. Yeah, I would still use Illustrator to obviously, I'd sketch it by hand, scan it in, but every time a client wanted a change, I'd have to basically redraw the whole thing. I thought, this is silly, I'll just use Illustrator, and I think you get more of an accurate display of what you want to portray anyway, and it's so much easier to be able to modify and edit things. And again, I'm looking at this thinking, okay, I've got my realistic looking thing, I've got my text, I've got my vector looking stuff, I've got sort of a mix of in between. I need something else in this space, because in my head I already know I've got a car like this here. I'd love another one sort of here. I like working in, I call it threes. Or odds, if you like. So I know if I've got a car here on a wall this sort of size, if we're just looking at the right side of the wall here, I know I need at least 3 of those sorts of realistic images to sort of balance out the whole thing. In my head, I'm looking at this thinking, okay, I've got a vehicle down on the bottom. Maybe I'll put another vehicle down here on the bottom. So I might have one up here, just so they're not all lined in a row at the base.
Yeah.
And there was one car in particular, it was an old Mercury that I saw in the client's warehouse. And I knew straight away I was going to put that in the mural, whether he wanted it in there or not.
So you did a tour of to check out the cars.
I took a bunch of photos myself. These are all the photos I took, of the place, tractors, cars, all sorts of stuff, all the branding as well, which...
Oh yeah, that beautiful type.
Yeah, so I've tried even using similar sort of type for the posters, all sorts of stuff. All that sort of stuff just helps tell this story a bit more. There it is. So I found it was a 1951 Mercury. This isn't his actual one. I just found an image online. And again, a lot of people, might say, "Oh, you're just Googling images. You've got to be careful." But because I'm hand painting a vehicle, it's not a personality. It's not anything like that.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable using that sort of thing. Again, I just did a very crude clipping mask in Illustrator with that car. I think before I did that, yeah, I did take it into Photoshop and just desaturate the color because I'm working with gray tone, so it gives me a better idea of the colors. Every now and then, I might just crank the levels, and sometimes what I do for when I'm probably jumping the gun here, but when I'm actually on site painting these things, I have a bunch of reference images on me anyway, just so I can have a guide of where the shading should go. And I might save this image 3 or 4 times, where I might crank the black levels because I want it darker down here, and then I might crank the light because I'd like nice contrast of light, and then I basically use those 3 or 4 images on site and paint it the way I feel works best for that particular thing.
That's super interesting. Like changing your reference, because the painting process can kind of affect like how it looks. So you're not trying to copy it in the paint version. You're trying to kind of use it as a reference and then paint it in its own way. That's really interesting with like having different versions.
Well, I do that as well because I know in my head, I when I paint my grayscale stuff, or even if I'm illustrating in that way, I like a lot of contrast. I love that sort of, I guess it goes back to the old sort of film noir style where you've got really dark blacks contrast with, this light that hits from one side. So I basically just, Photoshop, use different images to create that myself. If every now and then the image I find might be perfect, like, oh, I love the lighting as is. Here's my my Mercury that I photoshopped. I think I lightened it a little bit in Photoshop, and then I sort of bring it over here. And I remember, I do remember now, I did this and then I realized there's too much gray happening. I need some more color getting injected. Right. And so I put this in anyway. Once it's in there, it just gives me a better guide. And obviously this car, I didn't want to show the whole car. I need something here to sort of separate the 2 images. And I love using not just imagery and text, but I love creating my own sort of emblems and logos and that sort of thing to help tell the story, whatever theme, whatever backstory it is. And with the automotive stuff, I was just going nuts with it because I love all the old branding on cars, even oil pumps, all that sort of stuff. The old gas pumps had great branding. So I thought, I'd love to create a bunch of different emblems and logos that relate back to this. So the one I did create, I wanted it to be specific to the area that we were in as well, which is St. Peter's here in Sydney. So I created this sort of emblem.
Yeah, this is cool.
With a sort of, lion griffin sort of thing. I just wanted something. You see a lot of these sorts of images on a lot of the car branding and the car products. I didn't want to just copy one. I did just find, I got this, I've got a whole folder of different stock vectors that I purchased a long time ago just for stuff like this. And basically I just wanted to put together an emblem that wasn't square, wasn't circle, but something that would sort of fit, similar proportions to a poster, but without just repeating the posters over and over again. And then, so I knew I wanted something there. So I go back to, working file. And this was just, something I mocked up. I just wanted a simple look. I didn't want to be overkill as well.
It's really cool. And the type's awesome there. So, where did because we were talking about the type and the badges on the cars and the inspiration from the posters. So where do you get your type from?
I use a lot from the Adobe fonts that are available when you've got the Adobe subscription, which is great. And I just so for this particular one, I love fonts that look simple, but they have just something extra to it. So this, just something, and bold as well. Like for this particular icon, I wanted something really bold. So I just have a whole library of different fonts that I collect. If ever I see something, I love that font, whether it's in the Adobe library or I've purchased it, that sort of thing. So, and I guess I go back to the same sort of fonts, you'll see them sort of feature throughout my work.
Yeah, we often
Yeah,
find
'cause I
like our
just like,
favorite fonts and we're like, oh man, I know this is going to work
yeah,
because I've used it before. It's so great.
that's right. Yeah. So, and then, yeah, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't blocking off too much of that image. And then we've got the, yeah, so starting to fill it a bit more. Obviously, it's still a bit messy down here, but it's things like once I get these major elements in, I just sort of fill the space with other things, more text, different imagery. Again, I like the balance between the different styles of imagery. So now looking at this, I'm like, okay, I've got a lot of gray here. I might need to put another vehicle, but maybe in this back to this sort of vector retro illustration sort of look.
Right. So it's a bit of composition, like trying to balance it out a bit.
Yeah. So I know a lot of guys, and I've done it myself as well. They'll get this template and they'll basically figure out their entire composition, you know, with shapes or squiggles or whatever before they get to this point. Whereas I like to just see how it goes, basically, and it sort of just evolves, you know. And I might get to the end of the day and think, oh, there's something not working, so I leave it alone, and then I sit back the next day and then I think, oh, what if I try here? What if I move that, and all that sort of thing. So yeah, it's one of those things that just sort of evolves as you go. And again, I've just got that general idea in my head. I kind of know, I don't know what I want there, but I know I want something in certain areas. So that usually helps. And once I've got these major bits in, it is filling in the gaps, really. So I remember vividly from this point on, I was like, yeah, this is exactly how I was working on it. I got a bit stuck. I'm like, okay, how am I going to do it? And then one of the major things that the client wanted was a tractor that he owned, and I'd never painted a tractor in my life. Like,
Doesn't tractor murals don't come up that often?
No, not really. But I have to say, once I painted it, it's actually my favorite thing on the wall now. So this is not his actual tractor, but the same model.
That's a fine looking tractor.
The tractor he had was tucked away in his warehouse too. I just couldn't get a decent angle of the I wanted this sort of angle kind of looking up toward it, you know, giving it that sort of grand feel. And to be honest, I looked at it, I thought, how am I going to paint this? There's so much detail in this thing, you know, on that sort of scale as well. But anyway, that was a whole other story. So I knew I wanted this image. I didn't want it facing that way. So I basically flipped it the other direction. Because the reason I did that, I've already had one vehicle facing towards the right. Because the wall continued all the way down to the left, I wanted your natural eye, I wanted it to sort of look towards the left, so that, as funny as it sounds, if I had all the vehicles looking the one way, that's exactly where your eye looks. So yeah, so I knew I wanted it sort of facing back this way. So I dragged it in. I don't think I edited that image in Photoshop or anything like that. I dragged it back into Illustrator. Might have cranked the levels a little bit just to give it that nice contrast that I like, and placed it sort of, I knew I wanted it here, and already you've kind of got this, I'll just use the brush tool, you've got this sort of balance to it already. You've got that sort of that look. Obviously I don't want it to look, you know, that sort of triangle look, but once you fill in all these gaps in the negative space, that disappears. But this was pretty much one day's worth of work. I know I'm rushing through it now because I know pretty much exactly where everything goes, but that there, not including obviously drawing these posters and putting together, I'm talking purely from the, you know, putting the concept in terms of the layout together. That took a whole day just to do that. So it doesn't look like much for a day's work, but again, it's going back and forth, changing shapes, changing this. And when I work, I tend to get caught up in the details too quickly. So rather than knowing I just want a general shape there, I had to work on that emblem and get that emblem right.
Right. So you kind of get a little bit sidetracked.
I do.
Perfecting the type, or
because I want to see how it looks, and then I've done that before, and I end up not using what I've created anyway because something else fits the space a little bit better. Yeah. So you know, you can waste a little bit of time that way, but that's just me being me, and I just want to find out if things work, and if I've got an idea in my head, I want to see how it comes to be.
So I guess it's like it's a little bit different to sending a concept or a couple of concepts off to a client from, I guess, a graphic design perspective. because it sounds like it's also for you as well.
This becomes, yeah, look, I have this debate in my head all the time. You've got to because, you know, obviously I love what I do and I'm very lucky that I get to do it. It still is a job, and I have to be careful of, you know, I've got other jobs lined up. Things have time limits, deadlines. So there's that balance between creating something that you're happy with as well as spending too long. You know, you've got to be conscious of your billable hours, if you like. But doing what I do, and I'm sure a lot of creatives, I love what I do. So I'm not going to put out something that I'm not 100% happy with. So you do tend to obsess a little bit. So it does become very personal to you as the artist, even if it's for a client. You do, because it's basically your take on their brief, and you want it to, obviously, you know, you want to meet the brief, but you want it to show your work at the same time. So and especially a wall like this, I mean, there might be a few people out there who know this location in Sydney, but this is a huge intersection. You get thousands of cars going past a day. So I knew it was going to be something that people were going to see. So I thought, you know, I need to get this right. If I didn't include this emblem here, the clients wouldn't know any different and they wouldn't question it. But I wanted something there, and I wanted the little details and the text here and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, you definitely have to be happy with it yourself. There are definitely jobs out there. Obviously I put effort into everything, but there are definitely jobs out there. I'm like, okay, that's what the client wants. That looks fairly good. That, you know, I'm happy with that. And then there are jobs like this where it's like, nah, I need to get this right for me before I show it to the client, which again is that sort of that struggle, because you don't want to take too long on things, because you know, it can get out of hand. So you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, we have a question I'm just going to jump into. We're kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but so Alessandra asks, what's the process? Do you create this digital and then you go and paint it? Sorry, I think I missed the explanation. We talked a little bit about it, but yeah, maybe you could talk about that part.
Yeah, that's exactly,
because we do have about 10 minutes left. So
we're already there. Well,
yep, goes quick.
Yeah, there you go. Goes very quick. So it's definitely digital. Most of it's digital. I take it from digital. I do like these spark plugs, for example. They're hand-drawn sketches that I've done, just to get a certain look that I scan in and then, you know, just live trace it in Illustrator to create a vector. So I piece everything together digitally. And then once the client's happy, I just take it to the wall. And there's a few different processes I use to get it on the wall. I used to just do the whole grid pattern. So on my template here, I would create it to scale, and then I would create a 1 meter by 1 meter, basically grid pattern all the way across. I then go to site, I sketch up that exact same 1 meter by 1 meter grid pattern. You know, so on a wall this size, you could imagine there'd be hundreds of squares, and sketch it in. But for something that was this big with this much detail, I projected it. I still had to use the grid pattern to a degree because I needed things to line up. But I just used the projector to sketch on very rough line work, especially for things like this where I know I'm going to be shading it by hand anyway. I literally just sketch on with the projector, very, very rough lines, circle here, circle there. You know, there's a tire there, that sort of thing, and then sort of make it up when I'm painting it. But yeah, and a lot of guys use like this sort of squiggle technique these days, that, you know, you sort of just squiggle on different lines and images and stuff, and it helps draw, you know, it just helps you be able to, you know, paint and draw things to perspective when you're actually at the wall. But a lot of the time I do, because I include so much detail, and because I'm me and I need everything to basically fit the space how I've shown it on the screen. Client, I want that to have that exact same look and replicate it on the wall. So a lot of time I do use the projector, because I know I wanted in this section here, I wanted the posters to fill this section. And even then I did use the projector for this one. Even then I wasn't happy with a lot of the placement. So I was actually redoing everything or not everything, but a lot of things by hand on site anyway. Right. Like this shape, I remember, for example, this St. Peter's emblem, when I sketched it up, because the wall's so long, I couldn't get the projection done in one hit with the projector. I had to do it in, you know, different areas, and then everything else had to line up from that each time. So it was actually, might sound like an easy way to do it. It was actually a bit of a pain, to be honest. But like this emblem here, I wasn't happy with the shape the way I sketched it on, because it was just a very quick sketch. So I basically redid that entire shape by hand when I was up there on the scissor lift on the wall. So it really is just to give you a guide, because again, once you're Illustrator is great and digital is great because everything's quite set and specific. When you're painting something, things change. Like this text here is never going to be as clean when you're hand painting it, and not, especially on an angle, it's not going to be as straight, but you know, it doesn't matter. So it's it's definitely fun to see the two different worlds sort of come together. Especially
like the I guess the surface is something that you really need to think about as well. Was it brick or
this side? So the wall was two different. I'll see if I can open up that original image of the wall. Here it is. I'll zoom in. It's not the great image, but the right side where the automotive stuff is was a brick. You're not going to be able to see it here. But a very, how do I explain it? The you won't be able to see it there. The grooves of the brick were very deep, so it was a real pain to paint anything straight. Any straight lines, anything like that was a pain, because you'd be painting a straight line. You get to the end of the brick, and then there'd be a recess in the brick, and so you'd have to like blotch your brush in to fill that area, and that line would, you know, obviously become distorted. So whereas the left side of the wall was just a nice smooth render, which was much easier to paint on, much easier. But you know, that's all part of painting something outside. You know, I kind of like all those imperfections on different surfaces. I think it adds to the it actually adds to the artwork. So definitely a lot trickier, but still fun. So
nice.
So that's I mean, we are running out of time, but that's a very quick insight into how I piece together these concepts. I do have the final one that I can show. I don't know if it's worth.
Yeah, why don't we look at the final file? We probably have time for that. We've got about 2 or 3 minutes while I ask a silly question. You're talking about it being really sunny and everything like that. Can you project during the day? This is the silliest question I've asked on stream, I think.
Have to do it at night. So there was, I think, this is when I definitely used some friends' help at night, you know, being up on a lift and having your laptop and your projector down on the ground.
That was my follow-up question. Do you have security and backup there?
Yeah, have security. And also, like I say, using the projector is not as simple and as easy as it sounds. Like, there's a lot of actually strategic work involved, because even when I've done this on screen, this wall here is about 4.5 meters high. When I projected this car, I was like, wow, that looks too big. Maybe I need to shrink it a little bit, which is what we did. And then when you do that, obviously you've got different imagery that sits behind it that you might have to alter or change and all sorts of stuff. So it's definitely a tricky process. But you have to do that at night. So there was I think it took about almost 10 nights to project this entire thing. So I would project the first night. We go buff the wall, whatever colors, the background color, navy and beige. I think the first day we were able to project, I'm on the wrong layer. We were able to project that section. That was one night of projection. That took about 2-3 hours to do that, because by the time you line it up, you fit the space well, and obviously projector on has to be dead level. When you're on a footpath, it's not level, so you got to change the skew and the angles and all sorts of stuff. There's a whole bunch of stuff involved. One quick thing I like to do is include little figures like this, just to give the client the perspective on how large the actual imagery will be on the wall. Just puts it into context a bit more. So I don't know, I mean, it's very hard because it's such a long wall. It's very hard to fit it in one screen. But that's basically the final concept. That's what I was was happy enough to show the client.
That's awesome. That's great timing, actually, but we are out of time, so I don't want us to get cut off. So I think we'll wrap up for today. Thanks for taking us through that process. We will be back on Thursday, so we're going to jump in for some more mural fun. So if there's any more questions about the painting process, that sort of thing, jump in, see us on Thursday. So same time, 1 p.m. Here we are with Alex. But Alex, thank you so much.
Thank you. That was fun. That went really fast. So
I did warn you it goes fast. We have a little bit more time on the Thursday when we're doing that. Thanks everybody in chat. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on Thursday. Thanks again, Alex.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Cheers.
See you guys.